Well, we made it to another Friday and wanted to share some thoughts with you that I had this week. It's been awesome to see the response to these videos. It just blows my mind. It cracks me up. But also to let you know that at the beginning of the year, I don't really do resolutions per se, but at the beginning of the year, God was just really trying to stretch me out of my comfort zone. And so we started making videos of Sunday worship, and then along the process, just God again moved in my heart and said, you need to start doing something else. So we started the Friday Fruit, and have to thank some people for that, for just their encouragement to put some thoughts out here. It's easy because it's just a camera, and it's just me and my thoughts, but then the real courage comes when you have to actually publish the video and put it out for the world to see. So I wanted to share some thoughts just from the week, just with the fact that I was reading, I love Romans, I love Paul and his writings, and came across Romans chapter 10 in some verses. He says this, chapter 10, verse 14, how then can they call on the one they have not believed in, and how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And so I encourage you today, maybe speaking, preaching is not your strong suit. I know for me that when I took the spiritual gifts test many years ago, preaching and teaching was my spiritual gifts, and I love to do it. I'm passionate about it, and I'm continually trying to grow and trying to improve on those skills, and really try to develop those the way God would have me to develop those. But for some people, that's not their gifts. But I would want to bring a piece of encouragement to you that if we really understand what that verse is talking about. I wrote this question down here at the top after reading it in a devotion. Does our life preach the gospel? It's more than just words. So I would ask that, maybe encourage you with that today. Does your life preach the gospel? Because Paul would go on to write some great doctrine. He wrote 13 books of the New Testament, or the New Covenant, if we remember last week's video. He wrote those 13 books, and then there's his book of Hebrews that a lot of people want to give to Paul as his book, that he authored it, but there's no real clear defined, this is who wrote this book. So we just say the author of Hebrews. He writes some incredible things too, that really, I think, brings to the point what Paul is emphasizing in Hebrews chapter 5. And he says this, we have much to say about this, but it's hard to explain because you are slow to learn. In fact, though, by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's Word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Anyone who lives on milk, being still as an infant, is not acquainted with the teachings about righteousness, but solid food for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. And so maybe it's we get off the milk. Maybe for our life to preach the gospel, we need to step out into the life of maturity. Maybe we need to understand that we look at Peter and we go, man, he had some audacity to ask Jesus to call him out of the boat and walk on the water. But maybe for some of us, we need to have some audacity in our faith. Maybe for some of us, we need to get off the milk, start eating the meat. So for some of us, maybe that's where we are. We need to stop being as the infant, wanting the milk, and we grow and we mature and we get on the meat, the spiritual meat. I love that God calls us to the deep water. He doesn't call us to stay in the kiddie pool. He calls us to venture out, just like Peter did. But here's the thing that I know. we're just like Peter. We have maybe the want to, but then when he calls us, Peter steps out on the water and he gets distracted by the wind and the waves and just the idea of him walking on water, and he begins to sink. And Jesus outstretches his hand and says, "Will you take my hand?" And he does. For some of us, we get too distracted by our daily grind that we're in, this thing we call life. And so, I'll leave you with a couple things. Number one, does your life preach the gospel? How do we get to that place where we preach the gospel? Well, for some of us, we got to get off the spiritual milk and into the spiritual meat. For some of us, we just have to understand that we're going to have the audacity. We're going to have just this want to walk on the deep waters with Jesus. So I say thank you. I hope this blesses you. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you're looking forward to worship wherever you may go. Be in his house. Remember, keep worshiping, and God bless.